Good evening, everyone. Before I get into the policy discussions here, I just wanted to take a quick moment and reiterate and echo some of Council's sentiments with regard to the MD staff and everything that they make happen day to day. The topic areas that we've been able to discuss so far tonight, and we'll also touch on after this little presentation here, really are just a fraction of everything that all the staff all the staff are doing. And I'm comfortable sharing a perspective with regard to not only staff but my time with MD Council so far. Here at the MD of Tabor is everybody cares about the MD. Um, as they're making decisions, as council makes decisions at the council table, they're doing it with the MD's best interest at heart. And when I'm spending time with staff, whether it be out in the field or in the office, um, they're doing it. They're pursuing their work in an effort to make the MD better in delivering public services. So that's something that I do want to share with those that are joining us here virtually and who are those who are able to review this at another time. One other thing along those lines too is the opportunity I have had the opportunity to meet MD residents over the last year and a half, and I'm thankful for those opportunities and for those exchanges. I've had nothing but warm welcomes, warm discussions, and good discussions when I've had those opportunities. So as we transition into this part of the presentation with regard to policies, unfortunately, we couldn't touch on every policy that council and staff have worked on over the last year and a half or so. But we did choose a few notable ones. Some staff will help in terms of presenting a few of these, but we have chosen a few of the notable ones that we've put a fair amount of work into over the last year. And we do have a link here as well on this slide, and encourage everybody and anybody to check out the MD of Tabor policies and bylaws on the website. The link is there on this slide. It's not always super riveting or exciting to read government policy, but it is relevant to us in our daily lives on that local government level. So diving into the actual policies here that we want to summarize and give a little bit of context in, is at the beginning of 2020, Council had completed a recreation master plan. And the recreation master plan took a pretty deep dive into the funding nature as well as actual recreation services that the MD of Tabor delivers for and on behalf of its residents, as well as residents within the region. Some of the key policy objectives that came out of that recreation master planning process, and I'll summarize them here, are also what drove the creation and formalization of the recreation-based policies that are included in this presentation. So some of the key drivers, and there's three of them, and these are not in any sort of order of priority or importance. Because they're all relevant and important with regard to the recreation topic. So key policy objective coming out of that recreation master planning process includes the importance of planning for potential changes in the municipal district's financial situation. That was touched on briefly at the beginning of tonight's events in terms of our current financial reality. There was an importance of reviewing funding for our parks and our recreation services based on community needs that were identified as part of the master recreation planning process, which we were able to reach out to the community and receive some survey perspectives and opinions. Secondly, it was identified that there was a need to address regional issues for delivery of recreation services. And when I say recreation, we're referring to both recreation and culture. It was also identified along these lines the importance of working collaboratively with neighboring municipalities, while also ensuring that MD residents, their needs are advocated for and access to services maintained for them. Thirdly, the formalization of recreation funding criteria and processes. So what I can tell, based on my limited time here at the MD of Taber, is the MD of Taber has taken a really significant leadership role in both funding regional recreation initiatives, as well as providing additional support. So support in terms of in situations where you can provide in-kind services that also support recreation services. So council's been very active. Councils and past councils have been very active in providing that leadership to the region. And what was important, and I know with our current council, what's important that they wanted to show not only our residents, but also our neighboring municipalities, is the contributions, being able to quantify and show the contributions that the MD of Taber contributes to the recreation services locally as well as regionally, keeping track of the in-kind donations that the MD of Taber is in a position to provide, keeping track of the monetary donations that the MD of Taber is in a position to provide. So that's what drove, for the first two policies that are outlined here at the top of this slideshow here, that's what drove the creation actually of the first three policies. Is it provided for a way for us to actually keep track of what we're spending and where we're spending it, and to be able to show on a consistent basis our contributions. So that's the quantitative aspect to why we looked at adopting these policies. The more qualitative aspect is quite simply because council knows, and I hope council feels comfortable with me speaking to it like that. Council knows the importance of supporting our communities when it comes to recreation and culture, and they wanted to formalize and make a policy statement that it's important to them as well as to the MD residents, that there's purposeful investment that takes place in recreation initiatives, cultural initiatives, and services that are provided to the municipalities. Not only in the municipalities, but our hamlet recreation boards, as well as community organizations that provide services for our MD residents as well. So that kind of addresses, albeit very broadly, it addresses the first two policies, the operational grants for recreation boards, towns, and villages, as well as donations to community organizations, programs, events, and activities. Now, with regard to the Land Trust Reserve Funds policy, I was going to pass the torch to Brian Badura, and he can give a quick summary on the Land Trust Reserve Funds policy, which ultimately is kind of a larger donation-based policy with regard to certain capital projects that community groups or organizations may be considering. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Arliss. The Land Trust Reserve Policy is a third policy that was established as a result of the recommendations coming out of the Recreation Master Plan. The Land Trust Reserve Fund provides for specific purposes that are eligible under Section 671 of the Municipal Government Act. Land Trust Reserve Funds are accumulated through cash in lieu contributions made by developers when they're subdividing land. These funds in the Land Trust Reserve may be used for any of the following purposes: a publicly owned park, a publicly owned operated recreation area, school board purposes, or to separate areas of land that are used for different purposes. The funds are to be used for municipal projects or publicly owned facilities on public lands or for the purchase of public lands. The guiding principles included in the policy include enhancing or improving the quality of life for MD citizens, managing the Land Trust Reserve Fund and utilizing interest and money in lieu of municipal reserve land for improvement of new or existing parks, playgrounds, recreation, or school authority purposes. Maintaining a minimum balance of $50,000 in the fund, and used for projects. Our projects shall be limited to capital improvements and not applied towards operating expenses of a school, a park, or recreation area. And one of the final items is council will approve funding for selected projects by resolution. And that's a summary of the Land Trust Reserve Fund policy.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. So we started off with, we just heard from Brian Badura, and we're going to move here shortly to the other Brian Pierce, with regard to discussion around the cultivated lease lands policy, which was another policy that council actually put quite a bit of time, quite a bit of feedback, and quite a bit of blood, sweat, and tears into establishing. Previously, we didn't have an existing policy that addressed this particular topic and area. And our Director of Municipal Lands, Planning and Development will summarize the cultivated lease lands policy.
Thanks, Arlos. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, up until this point, the terms that we administered our cultivated lands just fell within the terms of the cultivation lease. So we just wanted to formalize a lot of those conditions and terms. And so in the summer of 2002, we undertook a review of the lease itself and some of the policies around the administration of the MD-owned cultivated lands. So just as a background, the MD owns about 6,200 acres of mostly dry land cultivation. In 2020, the average rent on these lands was about $39 per acre. In comparison, I guess if you'd like, we have had lands that were cultivated lands that were returned to the MD at Tabor, and then that we tendered out to the public and to the residents of the MD, and those rents recently resulted in an average of about $72 per acre. So just as a comparison. The MD does receive about $250,000 in ag rental on these lands, and about $200,000 in oil and gas surface rentals. So all in, it's close to $500,000 that these 6,200 acres generate for the MD Tabor operations. So the terms of the lease and the policies that resulted from the discussions with council administration and getting input from council was through a survey, was that weren't substantially different than what they were previously, but a few of the terms worth mentioning, I guess, that termination of the oil and gas payments to leaseholder were discontinued in the 2001 lease, 2021 lease. The increase in rent went from irrigated acres, which there are very few of. It's just in a few circumstances where someone may sweep their pivot over onto our lands. That rent went from $81 to $100 per acre, sorry. And the annual rent is increasing 2% of the ag use assessment in the crop years 2021 to 2023. So that in 2021, those rents, as I mentioned before, were $39 per acre. The resulting increase would be about $45 per acre then after those increases. And as well, when one of the conditions and considerations in the cultivation lease is that you can assign them to immediate family members, and the assignment fee went from $100 per quarter to $500 per quarter section as well in going forward. And those are mainly the changes that were generated from the review of the lease and its terms of the policy. And those leases in discussion starts around every 3 years on those leases is the lease term on those cultivated leases. That's about it.
Very good. Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
And again, just to remind everyone that these policies and bylaws, as we review them and as council looks at them and eventually comes to a point of adopting them, once they're adopted, we do place them on our website. They are easily and publicly available. I did see in the question and answer that we have posted the link. I believe it was That's in the chat function, the actual link that you can click on to actually review our bylaws and policies, MD of Tabor bylaws and policies at your leisure. So encourage anybody and everybody to do that. And for this portion, that's it. We'll look forward to answering questions that might come from this.
Okay, Arlos, thank you, Arlos and Brian. We're just about to the bottom of the agenda. Next, we have another video on SCAR Notify. And Bryce Serena will give us a presentation on the MD's new online services and tools. And then a final video on council live streaming. And then we'll go to the question and answer period.